Hi guys, it's Holly and I've got a drawing tutorial video for you today. So today I'm going to show you 3 slightly different ways that I like to draw roses, and as I'm drawing I'm going to go through and explain what I'm doing. Learning to draw roses was something that I found hard, and the only way that I got around it was by just practicing, and then one day I kind of cracked it, and now I really like drawing roses. They're one of my favourite things to tattoo. So this is kind of a response video to one that I posted a few weeks ago where I was showing you guys an old sketchbook of mine. The sketchbook was from when I was doing my tattoo apprenticeship, although I don't think I was really tattooing at the time. And I was talking about how I was dissatisfied with how I was drawing my roses, because I know that's the part that I found really difficult when I was learning, was understanding how to translate that 3D shape into a 2D drawing. So yeah, hopefully my explanations will make some kind of sense. And at the end of the tutorial, I'm going to show you some tattoos and paintings that I've done with my roses in them, so you can see how you could translate these line drawings into art or tattoos or whatever you want to do with them. And if you guys like the t-shirt that I'm wearing today, it's one that I designed for Stag and Raven, and I'm going to post you guys a discount code below so that you can get it for money off. And as always, if you want to see more of my tattoo work, the best place to find me is on Instagram. My name there is @Holly_Astral. You can find me on Twitter and Tumblr and Facebook, but I don't really post there so much. So I'm going to start by sketching out with my red pencil. This is just because it's light, and you'll get to see in a minute that if you use something very light just to put these initial lines on, then it's easier to go over the top and mark in with a heavier line. So I'm starting here by just marking out the center of the rose, and the way that I tend to do it is I make like a little acorn shape in the middle and then go around and use like a loopy movement to draw the petals going outwards. And when you're constructing that shape of the rose, you want to do like you do the acorny shape in the middle, then you do the next layer would have 3 petals, then the next layer would have 4 petals. That way they won't be too bunched or too crowded. You can make sure that you're checking the like the symmetry of it, making sure that the petals are evenly spaced throughout. And now I've got those very faint lines in, you can see I'm going back over and putting in some heavier lines. Now what I'm doing here is, if you make these little triangle shapes in front of that center part of the rose, that gives the impression of a folded over petal, and I find that that's the key to making a rose look like a rose, is having those folded over petals, because they're very characteristic of a rose. And so in the center here you can see that I've split the oval into 2 and done that little wiggly line, can you see? So that indicates the middle cluster of petals being folded over, and then behind it draw lots of little half moon shapes to indicate all that, you know, that little cluster of petals that you get in the center of the rose. I think it's helpful when you're drawing roses, even from memory as I'm doing here, is to maybe have 1 or 2 that you're looking at, just to kind of jog your memory as to what shapes that the petals are doing. So specifically for this rose I'm keeping it quite girly and using lots of roundy shapes. I find that when I'm drawing something very girly, I like to use round shapes, circly shapes, and if I'm doing something more masculine, then I'll use more pointy shapes, which I'm going to show you in a minute how you can completely change the feeling of a rose by using pointy shapes instead of round shapes, which I'm using here. So now I've got these petal shapes marked in, you can see I'm going around and adding in all these little curvy lines. The point of the curvy lines, I find, is to help me get that feeling of the shape of the petals being 3D. So by drawing these curved lines, you're indicating what is the curve on the petal, where is it going. So you can see the ones that I'm just drawing near there, how they're curling forwards, and you can achieve that feeling of something curling forwards by doing 2 curves facing opposite each other at the front of the petal, because that gives that optical illusion of something curling towards you, like curling towards the viewer. So now I'm going to apply these same principles and kind of go through it again, but change the shape of the petals slightly, and you'll see how this completely changes the feeling of the rose and how it comes out. So this time, starting with that same centre, drawing that acorny kind of shape, bisecting it into two, and then drawing the little cluster of leaves. Instead of going around and doing that almost like a cloud, like a circle, circle, circle for each petal, I'm bringing each one to a point. So I'm doing like a up down motion instead of a round round round, if that makes sense. So you can see that what this gives is a totally different shape to the rose. It's more angular. I think it's a bit more dynamic, but the principle of it is still the same, and the way that you're going to go around and construct it is still going to be the same. So you still want to do your center piece of the rose, and then the next layer out has 3 petals, and then the next layer out from that has 4 petals, and then maybe the next layer out from that has 5, or sometimes it's 4. It just kind of depends on how you're feeling and how it all ends up looking. But that's why I like to draw things really lightly just to start off with. It just means that you can see the shape of the whole thing before you commit to drawing anything in too heavily. And here on that triangle shape that I was talking about before that you want to put in front of the centre part of the rose, if you put that little V shape just in there, you see in the centre of that top part of the triangle, it gives that impression of the petal having a little bit of structure to it, that it's not just a floppy thing just flopping over like a, you know, like a banana skin, that it has a bit of structure. So to draw your leaves, I start by putting out just one center line on a curve, and then experiment with putting these little curvy shapes on. I like to imagine the shape of a diamond when I'm drawing them, but this is another bit where just, you know, have fun with it. I sometimes will just draw a whole page of leaves and then pick or trace the ones that I like best, the ones that I feel come out a bit more fluid. And so now it's time to outline, and I've got my uni pin markers, just trying to get the cap off. Oh, there you go. So this is a 0.8 and this one is a 0.1. So I'm going to use the 0.8 for doing the thicker lines on this, and then the 0.1 for doing the thinner lines. And so I've sped up this part of the video just while I'm tracing over. I'm just using tracing paper that I got from Wilkinson's. It's nothing special. I think it's actually kids tracing paper. And you can see here, I like to do little wiggly edges on the edge of each petal. And I think you can like see it properly now that it's in pen. But you can experiment with this, and like this is the real fun part to play around with. I find if you do lots of like dips and cracks in the edges of the petals, that will give you like a spooky kind of looking rose. Or you can experiment with making it really, really perfect, so you can like make it really, really round, and then it ends up looking like a Disney rose, like it ends up looking super girly, which is cute. But yeah, you can have fun with this part. And I get asked on some of my other tutorial videos, what's the secret to getting perfect line work? And the really boring answer is there is no secret. It just takes time and just practice every day. I know that when I started, like when I was first a tattoo apprentice, I was surprised at how hard it is to even trace things. But, you know, as you get going, your dexterity in your fingers will build up, and you will just get better at things. You know, you'll get better at those subtleties of holding the pen, and everything will just start to fall into place. So yeah, sorry guys, there's no secret, they're just uni pen markers. And as I was saying at the beginning of the tutorial about drawing those little curvy shapes to indicate the curve or the fold of a plane, I'm doing that again on the leaves, which, can you see, it's giving that impression that they're folding outwards, they're folding down on themselves. And here we go, I'm going to start outlining the slightly pointier rose. And you can see the kind of way that I'm doing it is the same, but I'm bringing it to a point each time. So instead of doing that sort of like round, round, round motion for each petal, I'm going and I'm doing like a round, round point almost, and adding that little point. You can see how it completely changes the feeling of the rose just to have that in there. And in a sec, you're going to see me again using the thin liner to do all those little lines on the petals that you can see me do just a second ago. And watch when I'm doing it how you can use these thin lines to show the direction of the petals, to show how they're curving. So here you can see, by putting a curve facing opposite each other on one that's at the supposed to be at the front of the rose, it gives that 3D effect. It gives that impression that the curve of the petal is coming towards you, kind of makes it pop out of the page. So you can see there how they're curving outwards from the center. So that's the way you want your lines to go, is outwards from the center. I think it's one of those things as well that's the easiest way to kind of get it is to just try it. And then once I've drawn the shape of the leaves, I'm going to go through and add those little thin lines again, just to indicate what direction the leaves are pointing. And you can see I've done them a bit different to last time, so I've tried curving the other way, and it's subtle, but you can see the difference between these leaves and those last leaves that I drew, that by changing the direction of these little lines, it makes them look pointier, makes them look thinner, and I think goes with the shape of the petals on this one, a bit different. So yeah, excuse me a second while I bugger about with my tripod, and I'm going to draw one last rose from you. So again, using these same principles, but I'm going to change the shape and the feel of the rose completely by changing the kind of shapes that you make. So again, start off with that acorny kind of shape in the middle, split it into two horizontally, and then start drawing your petals outwards. So I've got those triangle shapes again at the front, and then going around with a round of petals around the back. But this time I've taken that point to more of an extreme, and as I'm now going into these the outer layer of the petals, I'm changing the shape and making it more dramatic as it actually comes back into the rose. So you can see I'm drawing, like, imagining like a diamond shape or like a kite kind of shape. So you're making the point at which the petals then reconnects with the rose at the bottom very pointy, like really bringing that to an extreme. And then I'm going to start adding in all those lines that I was talking about before to give the impression of 3Dness, if that's the way you say it. And again, imagining that each of these diamond-shaped petals is folding on an axis. So, but to do that, I'm adding these little lines, kind of going from the middle outwards in a curve. And this is one that's fun to experiment with, because you can really get the feel that by changing where you're putting these little lines on the petals, you can really change the feeling of, you know, just how angular and dynamic this rose can be. And so yeah, I've sped it up a little bit again for you guys, just while I outline everything. But I think when I start outlining it, you can really see the different shapes that I've used, and I think it'll all become a bit clearer. Again, putting those little jaggedy points in on the edges of everything. Probably actually doing it a bit more this time, just because it goes with the whole shape of the rose that the petals are jaggedy. So gonna add all the jaggedy bits. I think these are kind of cute, because then you end up with a spookier looking rose. So if I was doing a piece that was like a darker kind of piece, like a sort of dark woodlandy spooky kind of thing, I would definitely do a rose like this, because I love doing them this way. I think they're really fun. So I think this is kind of fun to see how, you know, using the same principle for all three roses, but just changing the shape, changing the shape that your hand is making for drawing those petals on, and going from a roundy shape to a pointier shape to this kind of real what's the word? Exaggerated. That's the word. Exaggerated, pointy shape, that you can completely change the feeling of the rose. Hopefully these simple rules will help you when you're drawing roses, because I know that when I started, I found the idea of trying to capture the curliness of the petals and that 3D shape, I found that really, really difficult to imagine in 2D. So I guess I'm just trying to explain here my thought process when I'm drawing them now. This is how I'm thinking of them, and hopefully that will help you guys too. Yeah, because it is tricky, or I find it tricky to imagine a 3D shape on paper sometimes. So these are the ways that I get around that problem. And sometimes you guys tag me in your drawings that you've done using my tutorials, and I love that. So if you've done a drawing, tell me about it in the comments down below, or send me a link on my Instagram. My name there is @Holly_Astral. I would love that. And I'm going to go through my sketchbook with you guys now and show you how I usually draw my flowers. My sketchbook is kind of messy, it's always kind of loose. I don't really get too perfect with my drawings before I go over and ink them. You can see in this sketchbook here, I go usually from the red pencil straight to line work with the tracing paper. The ones where I've drawn on it in blue is because a customer has wanted to see their drawing beforehand, and in an attempt to not scare them, I've made it a little bit more of an understandable drawing for them. And then now I'm going to go through and show you how I turn these line drawings into tattoos and paintings. So yeah, this was a lot of fun sharing these techniques with you guys. If you have other techniques, I'd love to hear about them. I'm always looking for new ways to learn stuff. So yeah, let me know, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.